some colleagues who will be ratified later on as members of the IJB this morning. We've got Ian Dixon, who will be our new third sector representative, along with his colleague Lorraine Love, who will be his substitute for the IJB. We've also got Carol Ann Harrower, who is the carer rep, and Gillian Sherlock, who will be the substitute patient rep, along with our colleague Margot Briggs. So thank you very much. In terms of apologies this morning, we have apologies from Andrew Murray, from Gillian Morton, and from Kathy Cowan. Kenneth Laurie is not currently in the meeting, but he's in another meeting that will join us later on this morning as well. Okay, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? I see no hands. Fantastic. Okay, that then takes us on to the minutes of the last meeting, which took place on the 2nd of September. First of all, can we just check the minutes for accuracy? So it's my page 4, and I hope everyone's page numbers are the same. And then we've got page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, and page 18. Okay, so are we happy enough to accept that that was an accurate account of the meeting on the 2nd of September? I'm not seeing anyone disagreeing, so I'm going to take that as a yes, so thank you very much. That then takes us on to the rolling action log. Now we've got a few actions on the log this morning. We've got IJB action 213, so I'm going to ask Patricia to give a very quick update on that one.
Thank you, Chair. It's all completely. Apologies, we've
Just assuming at the interference, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
A number of members of the board may
already involved this week in some of the workshops that we started for the next phase of the development of Falkirk Community Hospital, and one of those workshops is specifically around bed-based care. So we'll report back on progress at opportunity. Thank you. Thanks, Patricia. And then we've got item IJB 5 again. I'm afraid it's yourself. Yes, in relation to Forth Valley Wide Services, we've got a paper on the coordination arrangements for those on the agenda item today. Thanks. Thank you. And then IJB 20, yourself again, Patricia. Yeah, there's work ongoing in discussion with health and social services colleagues, and we'll bring an update on that future meeting. Thanks. Thank you. And IJB 26. We've requested the information for those briefings, and we'll circulate that as soon as we've got that. We do have a briefing scheduled in the next 10 days for elected members on primary care. Okay, thank you. And the last action was IJB 45. That one was closed and completed at the last meeting. So thank you very much. That then takes us on to item 5, which is the Chief Officer's report. So again, I'm going to hand over to Patricia. Thank you, Chair. So colleagues, you'll see quite an extensive Chief Officer report in front of you today. It's reflective of the volume and depth of the work that is ongoing across the partnership. And by the partnership, I mean our health and social care services, our third sector partners, and our communities. So you'll see in the first section of the report, under section 4, we are seeking to continue the delegated authority arrangements until the next meeting. Just given the volume of demand and the ability for us to respond, particularly to funding requests, we would request that that continues. Section 4 also contains a summary of some of the key pieces of work that is ongoing. 4.4 describes some of the continuing system pressures that we are experiencing, but also some of the actions we've taken, for example, the daily flow meetings, to try to better integrate our response to those pressures and to look at ways that we can transform and improve. At 4:15, you will see a description of the recent urgent and unscheduled care joint work and collaborative that we're doing with the Health Service and colleagues from Scottish Government and Health Improvement Scotland. And you'll see outlined there 3 of the high impact areas that have been identified, and that's at 4:15. So that's namely the redesign of urgent care and urgent and emergency assessment, discharge without delay, and also virtual capacity. At 4:17, there's an outline of the winter planning arrangements that are underway, and I'm sure I don't need to remind colleagues about some of the challenges we're facing more widely in our communities around cost of living, utility costs, but also at the moment we're facing winter, although it feels like we've been in winter for 3 years at the moment, potentially flu, COVID, but also the potential for industrial action across not only directly employed staff, but also, for example, potentially head teachers, etc., which will impact the school closures or other closures that will impact on our workforce. So the teams are very involved at the moment in contingency planning, business continuity plans, taking account of potential electricity and other power outages, as well as some of these ongoing challenges. So very busy at the moment. At 4:20, there's an update on the funding that we've invested in the third sector work that's been going on to support discharges from hospital. There's an update on the vaccination programme at 4:21. And more detail at 5.8 on the third sector hospital to home service. As we've highlighted in the action log, there's an update at 5.12 on the checks for people with learning disability and some of the work that's going on to support that. We've also at section 6 given an update on the Forth Valley Royal Hospital ED Improvement Action Plan, and that is appended to the report. Section 7 summarises the recent consultation and ongoing work to develop the strategic plan, and we've had good feedback, which is detailed within that section, particularly 7.5 and 7.6. So the strategic planning group have reviewed the output of that, and the work will continue to finalise the strategic plan for further consultation. We've an update on the carers, the work around carers and short breaks in section 8, the update on the carers strategy and the need for us to review the current strategy and the work required to do that. At section 9, there's a summary of the workforce plan for the Health and Social Care Partnership, which has been brought to a previous IGB, and that is a really critical piece of work, notwithstanding the current pressures that we've got, but in terms of anticipating future workforce pressures, given some of the workforce availability and challenges we have across the whole health and care system. Section 10 details the work that we've got and some of the investments around tackling poverty in Falkirk. This is a priority area for Falkirk Council and for the Community Planning Partnership. And section 10 details the work that the partnership is doing to support and to invest in addressing some of the health inequalities. In section 11, there's a brief update on the work that's going on at the National Care Service. The Health and Social Care Committee is having a series of evidence gathering sessions which are ongoing at the moment. And in section 13, there's a summary of all the recent correspondence that we have. So apologies, that's a bit of a gallop through, but hopefully it gives you a real sense of the range and the depth of the work that's going on across the partnership. And I'll just bring you to the recommendations at section point 2. And you're asked to agree to continue to delegate authority to the Chief Officer to be renewed again in March, to note the ongoing work that's progressed around the Health and Social Care Partnership structure to ensure that the partnership can deliver against its priorities, note the timescales for the implementation of the internal redesign of internal care at home services has been extended to March 2024, note the anticipated timeframe for implementation of the new day opportunities for older people model, and note the progress update on the ED improvement plan. Note the ongoing work to review the strategic plan. note the ongoing work of the Carer Strategy Implementation Group, and note the publication of the Workforce Plan. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. That was indeed a very extensive report. Thank you. Colleagues, are there any questions for Patricia? Okay, Roger.
Thanks. Hope this is the right place to just ask a couple of questions, because I didn't quite understand a couple of bits in your report, which you're right, is very thorough. So thanks for that. In section 4.20, there's a bullet point incentivizing external providers to expand their assessment capacity. I wasn't quite sure what assessment capacity for external providers meant. Is it possible just to get a quick information about that?
I don't know if Gail could answer that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to come in and answer that one, Roger. So currently, in terms of the prescribing proportionate care, that will give us greater capacity to support more people that require care at home through looking at different opportunities rather than using 2 people or 3 people to provide that support. One of the key challenges in terms of rolling that out is the lack of OTs and people to undertake the assessments to identify people that might be suitable. So the proposal is that we provide an incentive for providers, if they're able to provide people who are skilled and qualified to undertake that assessment, to be able to undertake that assessment to determine who might be able to benefit, and thereafter to roll out the prescribing proportionate care. So it's hoped that additional capacity will allow us collectively to identify more suitable people who could benefit from the prescribing proportionate care approach.
So this is to change the pattern quite a bit, because usually it's in-house services, our social care workers, the OTs and social workers here in Falkirk who will undertake that assessment. Now we're asking that's outsourcing that aspect of assessment, which I don't think has happened before. Is that right?
I'm not sure if it's happened before, Roger. I couldn't comment on that in relation to in Falkirk. We are struggling to have enough people who are suitably qualified within our internal workforce, and that means that people who could benefit from this service, which would release capacity across the wider system, aren't benefiting. So this is really looking at different options to make sure that we're able to use the capacity that we do have in-house and across our wider system to best effect to support people in their communities.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Councillor Colley?
I suppose just a couple of comments and one question. I mean, I think
Fiona, can I start with you? Can you turn your mic up a little? Your volume's really low. Just so we can all hear your question.
Can you hear me now?
It's a bit better, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know, it's something to do with my computer, I think then. So I suppose just a general comment about the amount of work that is going on, and you know, I think it's amazing the amount of work that the staff, not just in the partnership themselves, but across our third and independent sectors are doing as well. I mean, I think we know that folk have been under pressure for a long time and you know, and I know this winter is going to be difficult, but I think just to recognise the efforts that everybody is putting in, and you know, adding carers into that as well, you know, and it's great to see the additional work around and from the carers group on investment in things like counselling and assessment and breaks, and also in the fund to support around health and well-being. So I suppose that my final point is just to ask a question, and it's around the cost of living. And one of the things that's noted is around free period products, and obviously for staff who've got a base, there's things on base, but I wondered about how we expand, how we expand that out to people who are delivering care at home, but also to carers and people who use services as well. And I just wondered about how much awareness we raise about people being able to order those products. And I know in the scheme of things, it's not necessarily a huge amount of money every month, but that's in the scheme of how much we're having to pay out on other things. I suppose it's just about how we make sure that everybody's got information about that.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Patricia, that's one that you can respond to.
If I can, I'll take that offline just so that I get that understanding right down to all of our bases and frontline staff, and then I can give you a response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last, oh, sorry, we've got Stephen and then Margot.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Patricia. Yeah, really extensive report. I mean, just probably a quick one for me, just in terms, I don't know if you can say any more on the contingency planning, particularly round about potential strike action, more about working, I suppose, with the unions to ensure that we are protecting the most vulnerable who may well be impacted by upcoming industrial action. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we're working across, there's a specific working group in the NHS. Obviously, we've never had nurses on strike before, so that will affect community nursing, community hospitals, of course. Also within our own workforce, it's more settled in terms of social work and social care, but it's trying to calculate and estimate potential impact of, for example, the teacher strikes that are planned. There's 3 days indicated in Falkirk, and that will impact on a lot of our employees across the system, you know, who are parents or grandparents who may be required to cover if the schools are closed. So that's a more difficult situation to calculate the impact of that when it's directly your own workforce. You know, we have processes to discuss with the trade unions of covering key priority areas, but in terms of that wider impact of other strike action, it's more difficult to anticipate. But we're working on how we can do that. I mean, you saw the 2 weeks school holiday this year had quite a significant impact across the system, and that was planned leave that we were able to manage. It still had quite a considerable impact on performance and availability. So I'm very mindful of that. I don't have the answers, I'm afraid, but we are in active discussions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. Okay, Stephen, are you happy with that? Yes, thank you. And last but not least, we have Margot.
Right, I hope it's not a foolish question, but after yesterday's autumn statement and some of John Swinney's announcements, do you get the impression that things are a little bit on hold, and will it be possible to progress things like item 11, the meeting of the Health and Social Care Commission's determinations?
I think it's quite early to be able to respond to that. I think Stephen and other colleagues need to better understand the impact of that. You know, I am aware that Audit Scotland came out with a report and a statement, I think on Tuesday, suggesting that perhaps it's a time, because of the costs and the pressures, to actually consider wider public sector reform. So that's a report. It's not in my report today because it only came out, but that's a report you might want to read, Margot, just in that.
Thank you.
Okay, I can see no other hands up. So this is a paper for a decision by the board. So recommendation 2.1 is to agree to continue to delegate authority to the chief officer. Are we as a board happy to agree that this morning? Fantastic. I see no one disagreeing with that. And items 2.2 to 2.8 are simply for noting. And I think for the minutes, we'll just say that these have been duly noted by the board. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Patricia, for that report. However, you're not getting off lightly. Item 6 on the agenda, which is the coordination of Forth Valley-wide IHIB functions and services, will be presented by yourself.
Thank you, Chair. And my apologies, this was a late paper, but it was really important to get this paper to you today for a decision so that we could progress with the work required. So members of the board of long standing will be aware that we've got outstanding audit actions in relation to fuller integration of community health and care services. And I'm delighted to bring this joint paper today to you. It's been jointly written with the Chief Executive of NHS Forth Valley and the Chief Officer for Clackmannanshire and Stirling Integration Joint Board. And it's the terms of agreement between the two integration joint boards about how we will operate these Forth Valley-wide services. So these are services, for example, mental health services, primary care services, out of our GP services that are provided across the whole of Forth Valley, and which one partnership will host or coordinate on behalf of the other. So this paper outlines in section 3 the background to this in relation to the legislation, the Public Bodies Joint Work in Scotland Act 2014. It also outlines the use of the governance principles, which are at Appendix 1. These governance principles were agreed by the IGB at its meeting in February 2019, and we've used those as a framework to structure this agreement. So the plan that's here for approval is that we would transfer operational management through the NHS board to the partnerships via the IGB, and that would be on the basis of an agreement between the IGBs for the planning, commissioning and delivery of these functions or services. So the proposal is that Falkirk would undertake the strategic planning and operational management of primary care services, including out of hours, and the contracting of primary care services through the NHS board to be the lead health and social care partnership for primary care. Now that will open up a whole range of new opportunities to look at how we really integrate a local and a GP practice area to look at a range of ways that we can support a range of services within the community for those localities based on the locality needs assessments. The second proposal is that Clackmannanshire and Stirling IGB would undertake the strategic plan and coordination of specialist mental health and learning disability services on our behalf. Section 3.10 indicates that this would complete an outstanding audit action for us, and as Chief Officer I would be delighted if we can make this progress. Section 4 goes into a bit more detail about the transfer and coordination of the functions and what the lead HSCP arrangement would mean. So that's detailed within the bullet points at section 4.1. I just need to point out that the General Medical Services contract, the GMS contract, is retained as the responsibility of the NHS board. However, it's common practice elsewhere that contract is also managed on behalf of the board by the coordinating health and social care partnership. So that's part of the proposal. And as Chief Officer, I would be accountable to the NHS board for the delivery of that contract. But it would mean that we would have that contractual arrangements and the planning, other strategic planning functions all within the one team. So there is some due diligence work that will be required in section 4.2. Explains that the chief finance officers and the chief officers will work with colleagues in finance, HR and the clinical directors in the NHS Forth Valley to ensure that we've undertaken and completed a comprehensive due diligence process. So the partnerships will be responsible for the operational management, for the staff, for the budget and report to the IGB. Will also report to the other IGB for the delivery of the strategic plan and be accountable to the other IGB for the delivery of that. We've drafted up terms of agreement, which are appended at Appendix 2 in the document, and that outlines the terms and the reporting required for the IGB that's coordinating the services on behalf of the other IGB. This paper will be submitted for consideration and agreement to the Clackmannanshire and Stirling IGB at its meeting next week on the 23rd of November, and also an update will be provided to NHS Forth Valley on the outcome of the IGB meetings. So you will see the agreement at Appendix 2, and it sets out the terms of the agreement, the definition of coordination, an outline in section 4 of that appendix on the services that would be strategically planned and operationally delivered. Also in section 6, it outlines the coordinating responsibilities for each of the IGBs. And also under section 7, it takes account of the budget and the finances required for coordinated services. So there's still quite a bit of work at officer level for this to happen, but we've been working with the chair of the health board, the chair of the IGB, the 3 local authority chief execs and the NHS chief exec, and we've also had some support from colleagues in Scottish Government to get to this point where we are today. And we would be aiming for transfer very early in the new year. It will open up, as I say, a whole raft of opportunities and learning from elsewhere, where other partnerships have had primary care as part of them since 2016. So there's a lot of learning and really looking forward to the opportunities that we've got ahead. I should highlight at the Appendix 1 of Appendix 2, there is an outline of a dispute resolution process. Hopefully that would never be needed, but it's a really key thing that we've got that agreed from the outset. So I'm happy to take any questions. You will see the recommendations at the start of the report. As members of the board, you're asked to note that this will complete the transfer of functions and budgets in line with the Public Bodies Joint Working Act and in line with the integration scheme. You're asked to agree the proposed coordination arrangements with Falkirk and Clackmannanshire and Stirling as the lead HSCPs as set out in section 4, and also to approve the terms of agreement attached to Appendix 2, subject to the ongoing agreement by Clackmannanshire and Stirling IGB. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. And I have to say I'm delighted to see this paper come to the board. And like you, I really look forward to seeing what opportunities we can create by getting this over the line. So thanks very much. Can I just open it up? Colleagues, does anyone have any questions or comments? Gordon, please. Oh, sorry. Gordon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is an incredibly complex area, and I think there's some great progress made here. I think with kind of delegations going one way and directions going the other way, and some of the routes of budgets being unclear as money comes in one place and is delegated to others and managed by a third. I think that work to unpick some of this and to work out the reporting lines is going to be very, very important. And kind of speaking as chair of audit, there is going to be a need to look very closely so that we're clear about where our, in inverted commas, money is going and what it's buying. So I think there's still quite a bit of work there to do in the fine detail. The other issue I think we need to look at, I think there are opportunities in all of this, but I would like to see some sort of outcome reporting mechanism within all of this, as well as the financial reporting, so that we can see, you know, what is all of this actually achieving for the people we're serving? What are the benefits that we are realizing, so that we're in a position to be able to demonstrate them, you know, in numbers, hopefully against a baseline rather than simply in description. Final point I wanted to make was just about the kind of review process. It talks about a full-scale review in 2026. Now, I can understand the need to give this a couple of years to bed in before looking too fundamentally at it. But given all of this may change again with National Care Service coming online in a few years, I think we may need to look at some sort of interim reviews or progress updates, just so that we're clear about what's happening in the short term before NCS comes in, so that we're in a good position when it comes to transfer from the IGB to care boards, whatever they may look like in the future. So I think there's a bit of kind of reporting still to be worked out, is there? But in principle, I think this is great progress and something that's long overdue, and happy to see the report.
Thanks, Gordon. Patricia wants to come in on this. I'm going to hand over to her.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gordon. You make a really valid point. We did actually have a year in as an initial review before that 2026. However, we are overdue a review of the integration scheme. So I would anticipate we could mop it up in that review of the integration scheme. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate all the people who've been involved in getting to this. I'm very pleased to see this report as well. I'd like to give my sincere congratulations to everybody. I'm aware of a huge amount of work that is involved, and I think it has been testament to their tenacity and many other things that we've got here. So well done. I'm also aware that this is going to then, that's just the first step. And there's a huge amount of work that's coming as a result of it, if we decide to approve the recommendations here today. So it's a bit kind of a follow on from what Gordon was saying there. And could you say a little more about exactly what you see as the benefits for the public and people who are using all these services of this integration, and also what you see as the kind of the biggest risks in terms of the things that might not easily be achieved?
Okay. So at this point in time, members of the communities and the public will be really aware that there's been quite a bit of press coverage this week about accessibility to GPs and getting access to practices, especially given, you know, the 2 years of lockdown that we came out of earlier this year. So it's really looking at that. We've already in Forth Valley had an extensive rollout of the primary care improvement plan and the access to multidisciplinary teams. But this is really taking it a bit further. We've already in Falkirk got community link workers who are spread across a number of third sector organisations as how they can work and support some of that locality planning work around the community health and social care needs. We've invested in community learning and development workers. So we've got community learning and development workers. We've got community link workers. We're also, as part of this, the transfer will happen of health improvement, and it's in the report, but I didn't highlight it in my narrative. We will also have health improvement capacity within each locality. So you're then building a team around that locality area that the GPs will be able to work with and plan with around a whole range of community-based supports and opportunities that will, particularly at the prevention end of the spectrum, but also the management of long-term conditions, really looking at working with the communities, but also working with clinical colleagues in the health service to look at improving some of the, for example, the respiratory pathway, the diabetic pathway. You know, what can we do more of in the community that actually helps with that preventative element of long-term conditions? So there's a number of areas, but that's just one example.
The second part of the question was, what are the major risks that you see in terms of things that might go wrong? Because in every major reorganisation, there are problems.
So there's risks in the system as it is in terms of sustainability of some GP practices, and could this exacerbate that? So it needs really close consultation and engagement and joint planning. It's really about us joining things up. So.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Colley.
Yes, I'll try to get a bit closer to the microphone. I don't know what's going on. Don't know what's going on with the laptop, and I think I just want to echo again what others have said. I'm so pleased to see that we've got to this point now. I think it's been a long time coming, and I'm really glad that we've got to a point where we're able to delegate these functions and the operational management, because I think we have been loosely linked to some of the things, but not necessarily been able to coordinate it with the other functions of the Health and Social Care Partnership, and also linking into our community partners as well. I have one question, and Patricia might want to answer it later on. It's actually around I'm on the planning committee within the council, and one of the things that I'm very keen to see is that all of our planning applications, particularly major planning applications, have a contribution towards our healthcare in the community, and it's not always the case. And I suppose, and I know at the moment the IGIB isn't a statutory consultee, but in relation that a lot of the contributions are related to primary and community health care, and I just wondered about how we might ensure that we are grasping that opportunity to bring extra investment into our services in Falkirk, and equally trying to encourage our partners in Stirling and Clackmannanshire to do the same.
Thank you. It has been an area which hopefully you've seen some improvement over the last few years, because it's an area that I've really been pushing with colleagues in the NHS so that they are able to exercise that strategic responsibility. And I know that we have been successful in some of the recent planning applications to get that planning gain in, but I accept your point, it needs to be in every planning application, it needs to be taken account. So I think that's something that we will have more leverage around, as with the responsibility for primary care services in the partnership, that I would expect to have a louder voice in that.
Okay, thank you. David Heron.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I wasn't this one. So I mean, I just wanted to say that I think this is a positive move, and I think this could be very positive for primary care services. I think we've needed a kind of simplification of the sort of management oversight structure that we've had in primary care over the last few years, and this could well provide this. Saying that, I think this is going to be very, very challenging, and there's going to be a need for lots of expertise within our HSCP to make this work. Personally, I could probably talk for hours, and I'll be very brief, but the issue we have in Forth Valley is our access and our demand. There's a disconnect between access and demand. Our GPs are working extraordinarily hard. We're seeing 25 to 30,000 appointments per week in Forth Valley. This is way above what the GP contract was expected to fund. So we have a disconnect. We have a problem between demand and capacity. There's really strong evidence in Norway that access and continuity to GP services saves people's lives and reduces hospital admissions. Really strong evidence. So I'm hoping that this will create some move for change, although I think I would temper people's expectations, because a lot of GP contractual stuff comes from national decisions, not from local decisions. The other thing I just wanted to, on page 6 of the report, GP out of hours services, just a typing error. It says GMed. That's the name for the out of hours service in Grampian, not the Forth Valley one is just Forth Valley out of hours services. And Fiona Colley brought up the planning applications, and we have been much more successful at getting funding in the planning applications, absolutely. The challenge then comes in actually being able to spend the money, though. We have to actually build facilities within the time frame set out in the planning. I think it's 10 years usually, and just bolting on a room to current premises is extraordinarily difficult, actually, and a lot of the time you need a full new premises, which of course the small amount of money per house doesn't actually deliver. So yeah, so it's good that we're getting it in the planning applications, but I think there's still huge challenges to actually spending the money and improving and expanding GP facilities. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Should you want to come back in on that one?
No, I think I agree with the points that David's made.
No, absolutely. Fiona, is that something that in your planning role that you could consider in terms of what David is raising?
Absolutely, and obviously that it's also about increasing capacity, but that's certainly something I'll have discussions with planning officers about how we can one, and make sure it's included, but also make sure that it's useful.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks, David. Roger, you've got your hand up. I'm not sure if it's a legacy hand or if you have another question.
I've got another question. Thanks,
okay.
Chair. That's okay. Sorry, folks. I'm struggling to get my head around just how this, I mean, it's obviously a complicated report, and Gordon noted this as well. I had to get my head around just the practicalities of how this would work in practice. So I tried to think about my own area of work, mental health, and I wasn't quite sure what the specialist mental health services would consisted of, but I assumed eating disorder was probably one of those. And of course, eating disorder it has interactions of so many other bits of what the IJB does. Transferring that to the other IJB, I wondered how, if this IJB here had any issues about changing that service or expectations about that service, how would that in practice come back to this J? How would this JB be involved in directing how for example, that service interacted with other services, and how that was? Could somebody just run through that so I can get my head around this a bit more clearly?
Thanks, George. I'm going to pass over to Patricia.
Sorry, I should have highlighted this in my presentation of the report. Falkirk Health and Social Care Partnership will retain the management of community mental health and learning disability services directly, and that's a particular strength, and we felt very strongly that we retained that at a community level. The mental health services, which will be managed by Clackmannanshire and Stirling, are the inpatient mental health services and other specialist mental health services, as you've described. A hosting health and social care partnership will not be able to make any changes to the way services are delivered, or the planning will need to be agreed with the other health and social care partnership and through the IGB as well. We've got very good working relationships with Clackmannanshire and Stirling, and we've worked very closely with them to get to this point. But it's important, it's always the framework needs to be in place so that you've got the point of reference. I believe that we have, through the due diligence process, this will throw up a lot of these issues and allow us to have a really clear description of how things will work, and we can let the IGB see that for assurance, so that it's not a case of over in one area that we're tinkering with primary care services in Alloa without full reference to the communities there or to the IGB. So it's very, very careful about the impact and the clarity around any decisions of what services are. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance, but we will be doing some more of that detailed work.
Okay, thanks, Patricia.
Thanks, Patricia. I don't know if it's possible to give a more detailed description of which services were described at some point.
Yeah, we can do that. I suspect for the next meeting, and we can do that. We can also bring something to the Joint Staff Forum, Roger, so we could have more information there.
Okay, so update to the next staff forum or a future one, and also to a future board meeting. That seems reasonable. Okay, in terms of the recommendations, then going back, we are asked to note that this will complete the transfer of functions and budgets in line with the Public Bodies Joint Working Scotland Act, agree the proposed coordination of arrangements, and approve the terms of an agreement which are attached. Are we happy enough to do that? Yeah, I see no one who's saying no, so thank you very much, and thanks to the people, Patricia. That is great that we're getting there, so that's good. I think we get a bit of a read. I'm going to hand over for item 7, which is the 2022-23 finance report, to the Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 7 is the finance report, and this report provides a summary of the financial position for the first 5 months of the current financial year. So that's to the 31st of August. Also includes a projected outturn to the year end. And for the year to date, there's a net overspend of £395,000 on the 31st of August, and the forecast outturn anticipates a break-even position by the 31st of March. Section 3 of the report refers to the annual budget and the movement in the annual budget since the previous report to the IJB board. The current annual budget is £281.985 million, which is an increase of £4.453 million from the previous report. and the overview of that budget movement is contained within Table 1, which summarises under 3 broad categories: additional in-year funding allocations, budget environment, and transfer to and from reserves. With the change in the budget, that also necessitates a change to the payments to both Falkirk Council and NHS Forth Valley, and the updated directions are contained within Appendix 1. Section 3.4 note that there will be some further budget adjustments, and it's worth just highlighting that in terms of some of the allocations we're receiving this year, there have been changes from previous years. So for things like Primary Care Improvement Plan, the Tranche 2 funding we are receiving in the current year will be reduced by the level of brought forward reserves or last year's underspends. So we're actually receiving less funding this year than we have done in previous years, but up to the same full allocation for PCIP when you add in the brought forward reserves. Section 4 of the report deals with the year-to-date performance, and Table 2 summarises the position with an underspend of £1.5 million for the integrated budget and an overspend of £1.898 million year-to-date for the set-aside budget. In terms of those, that set-aside or large hospital services area, the overspend of £1.898 million for 5 months is considerably higher than the overspend that we reported at the end of June at the last board meeting. And that reflects uncertainty regarding COVID funding for set-aside services. The funding issue is still to be resolved with Scottish Government. In section 4.5 of the report, as noted at the last board meeting, the position includes within set-aside the budget and costs of medical staffing that transferred over on the 1st of April. And the board requested at the last meeting that due diligence exercise be completed on this transfer. Just to note that the receipt of the information for that due diligence exercise has been delayed by significant capacity challenges within the acute finance team. Within 4.6 of the report, we refer to the overspend within set aside, and just note that to date, the IGIB has had no oversight of any operational or budget decisions with regard to the set aside budget. It's anticipated that there will be no change to current arrangements, but there is still an outstanding audit action to review the integration scheme and to agree the risk share agreement. The lack of confirmation of treatment of set aside overspends poses a significant financial risk to the IGIB. Should Forth Valley, NHS Forth Valley depart from what has been custom and practice up till now. And so the board is asked, when we come to the recommendations, to instruct myself to work with colleagues within both the NHS and Council to conclude the risk share agreement. It's a matter of urgency. Community hospital services are, the overspends are, or underspend, I beg your pardon, are detailed slightly further down in the report in section 4.8, where we have an underspend of £1.820 million for the year to date, and that's largely due to the closure of the 4 wards at Falkirk Community Hospital. In respect of the community hospital ward budgets, plans have been developed for the utilisation of recurring funds of £3.750 million and the one-off reserves that we carry forward from last year of £829,000. And those plans are detailed in the bullet points in section 4.9 of the report. These include just over £1.4 million to permanently increase the staffing establishment in Bowness Community Hospital Ward 1 and Falkirk Community Hospital Ward 5, where there are additional beds within the system. Just over £1 million to transition an internal care home into a slow rehab or longer term rehab facility. £781,000 will be retained for 18 additional long-term care beds, £88,000 for the creation of a bedded care manager post, £226,000 to enhance staffing levels at the other ward in Bowness Community Hospital. And that then leaves a balance of 276,000 plus earmarked reserves towards overall financial position and towards other appropriate developments. It should be noted that NHS Forth Valley has made the decision to open 10 beds in Stirling Community Hospital Ward 5 in order to decompress the Forth Valley Royal Hospital site and ease the current significant whole system capacity challenges. This proposal is being discussed at senior management level within NHS Forth Valley, and the Chief Officer has expressed some concerns about the development. At this stage, it's unclear how this is being funded. I move down to sections 4.12 and 4.13. These outline the progress with the savings programme for the current year. Table 3 summarises the current position with full details contained within Appendix 2. Work continues to progress the management and operational restructure to ensure that we have future capacity to deliver the savings programme, transformational priorities, national requirements and other IJB priorities. Section 5 of the report considers COVID, winter pressures and other developments. In respect of COVID costs, Scottish Government has advised of their intention to claw back any excess IJB COVID funds from COVID reserves as a result of revised guidance which reduces admissible COVID costs in the current year. Scottish Government has advised that further guidance will be issued and it's anticipated these funds will be reclaimed before the end of the financial year. Section 5.2 just at the end notes that in terms of our current forecasts, we anticipate that we will spend just over 5 million of the reserve and just over 10 million be returned on that basis to Scottish Government. 5.3 starts off to review our winter pressure funding. During 2021-22, Scottish Government announced a number of winter pressure funds. Underspend from 2021-22 have been carried forward through IJB reserves, and both the carry forward reserves and the recurring funds available in the current year are summarised in Table 4 of relief. Just under half of the funding available within Table 4 is allocated for care home developments, and plans for this funding are noted in section 5.5 of the finance report, the various bullet points there. 5.6 notes the healthcare support worker funding stream. 5.7 looks at the range of proposals for the multidisciplinary team working funding stream. And 5.8 refers to the interim care funding scheme, which is being used to procure additional block and spot purchase beds to increase capacity and improve flow. And just also in section 5.8, it does note, it says in here that a new tender exercise will progress during October. Obviously, we are now beyond that date, and I can confirm that we have gone through the tender exercise and received various bids for new spot and block purchase beds. 5.10 of the report refers to the Oakbank housing development. This is a Falkirk Council new build project at Wilson Avenue, Oakbank in Pomont, and it will deliver 28 additional high demand homes, including 21 amenity flats and 7 wheelchair bungalows, which will form part of a special letting initiative. Due to rising costs within the construction industry and the impact of the pandemic, project tender costs exceeded the Falkirk Council budget allocation by £2.262 million, and the board is asked to consider a contribution as a collaborative approach to the project. Section 5.12 outlines a proposal to bridge the funding gap, and the IJB is asked to consider a £1 million contribution to the development in the current year, funded from HRA earmarked reserves. Section 6 of the finance report deals with the current year forecast outturn. The current forecast suggests an underspend of just under £2.4 million for the integrated budget and an overspend of £1.869 million against the set-aside budget. It has, as we said earlier, been custom and practice over the years for NHS Forth Valley to manage the set-aside overspend. Figures are laid out in Table 4. Within section 6.2, the forecast suggests an underspend of £530,000, but I think at this stage it's prudent to report a break-even position to the IJB board, given the COVID funding uncertainties and given the considerable system-wide pressures that may result in additional expenditure over the winter period. 6.3, the large hospital services overspend or forecast overspend of 1.869 million hasn't been updated since June 22 due to the same capacity challenges that I referred to earlier within the acute team, and it's inconsistent with the year-to-date set-aside overspend of £1.898 million. Present uncertainty surrounding COVID funding could mean the year-to-date overspend will reduce, or it could result in the forecast position changing, depending on Scottish Government COVID funding assumptions for the board. So that will need to be followed further. The 2022-23 pay awards remains outstanding in all areas, and the current budget position assumes a 2% inflationary uplift in line with advised payroll modelling at the time. Scottish Government has confirmed that increase above original modelling will be funded for Agenda for Change and medical staffing, and that will be done through resource profiling. Other pay awards above 2% represent financial risk. A share of the Scottish Government 140 million contribution towards the local government pay award, what is anticipated in this report, although that's yet to be confirmed. The latest position suggests that Falkirk Council plans to retain the funding in 2022-23, although further dialogue will continue. With much of last year's winter pressure funding announcements ring-fenced for specific purposes, one recurring element is available towards general investment, and the plans for that funding are outlined, beg your pardon, in section 6.6. So a portion of that funding will go towards structure redesign that has been discussed previously, to increase capacity, to deliver strategic priorities as agreed in principle at an earlier IJB board. The anticipated removal of non-recurring social care funding of £1.8 million in 2023-24 is the other reason why we are keeping that funding aside. It won't be required though until 2023-24, and accordingly we are asking the board to consider today the creation of an earmarked cost of living reserve to give the IJB flexibility to manage a variety of pressures over the current and next year, arising from the impact of fuel, energy and general prices pressures, provider sustainability concerns, interim care needs and COVID funding uncertainty beyond the current year. Section 6.7 notes that we are anticipating a break-even position, and that is predicated on the various bullet points within section 6.7. So if I could go back to the recommendations, the IJB board is asked to note the year-to-date overspend of £395,000. Note that the risk share agreement for 2022-23 has not been agreed yet. Instruct the Chief Finance Officer to work with NHS and Council colleagues to conclude the risk share agreement as a matter of urgency. Note that a break-even position is forecast to be achieved by year end. Approve the breakdown of payments to Falkirk Council and NHS Forth Valley as per the direction summary provided at Appendix 1. Approve the contribution of £1 million from the IJB's HRA Housing Adaptations Reserve towards the Falkirk Council new build project at Wilson Avenue, Beaumont. And finally, approve the creation of a cost of living earmarked reserve £1.8 million to provide the IJB with flexibility over the current and next financial year during a period of considerable uncertainty. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. Colleagues, do we have any questions? Councillor Hannah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the report, Stephen. I'm going to show my ignorance here, I think, and my lack of understanding of this. You're saying that the overspend, we're in an overspend position in August. You're also saying that we have a situation with the Scottish Government reclaiming monies that we had in reserves. But you're still saying that it will be okay at the end of the financial year and we will be in break-even point. Could you maybe explain that a bit more clearly? Because when I think about money being taken back and we're already in an overspend position, that doesn't look good. It also does appear to be the case that the amount, the earmark reserves of 15 million in your 5.1, paragraph 5.1, but later on it's a different figure that's referred to, and I'm sure there's a very good reason for it. But then it comes to the end with saying the excess COVID funding recovered will not be to the detriment of the IJB. It looks like some very careful and very clever accounting in your part. I'm just curious.
I think the clues in the set aside and the assumptions at the back page. So,
I will attempt to answer that, but you're absolutely right, Councillor Hannah. It's a very complex position. So I'll try and deal with the COVID funding first of all. We do have COVID reserves of £15 million. We are, in terms of the guidance, only able to offset our COVID costs in respect of our integrated budgets. So the set aside budgets, and this all kind of ties in with the who is financially responsible for set aside. We can't offset from our reserves the COVID costs for set aside services. So a large part of our overspend relates to those large hospital or set aside services. The intention when the Scottish Government clause back the COVID funding is that they will redistribute that funding to health boards and whatever areas they've identified as needing COVID funding. That's where I have some uncertainty over both the year-to-date and the forecast position for large hospital services, because I still need to understand what assumptions Scott Urquhart, Director of Finance, is working to for those large hospital service budgets. So that's the COVID part of it. Beyond that, table 4 that was within the report identifies a whole number of other reserves. So that's not including the £15 million worth of funding that is specifically for COVID. So it is complicated because we've actually got a lot of other reserves. We've got at least £5 million worth of reserves that we've noted in this report, and there are reserves for other areas, such as the HRA reserve that's referred to in the report, carer strategy, and various other funds too. They are earmarked reserves and they're there for specific purposes. And that's what makes this all rather challenging, because we should only be spending money on the purposes that they're earmarked. So we don't necessarily see them in the main report, but where spend comes in, there's a reserve there to offset it. I don't know if that helped or just made it even more confusing.
In relation to the COVID reserves, the government gave an additional COVID contribution at the tail end of last financial year. And that was to meet all the additional COVID costs around provider payments, enhancements, all of the things that were going on. So the earmarked reserve that is there is everything that's already committed in terms of, we've still got some providers who are only coming in with their claims, if you like. Net of that, the indication from Scottish Government is that they're going to take that back in centrally and redistribute it. So it looks like a big number, but it's actually not available. It's only available for the provider claims and other things that were specifically outlined, and that will go. What we're also seeing in the, as highlighted in the report, is that some funding streams, for example, Primary Care Improvement Fund money, this year's allocation will be net over current reserves. The Scottish Government are taking account of if we've got a reserve and topping it up to the annual value, but giving us less.
That's for the next financial year.
Yeah. So that's an increase that's coming in a couple of streams. So although the reserves look really, really healthy, we need to understand some of those nuances, and also it's a developing situation that Scottish Government are taking this approach. So we need to anticipate that for some funding streams.
So we have uncertainty about what is going to be clawed back, and therefore uncertainty not just for this year's budget but also for next year's budget.
And you can see that in the business case paper that Stephen's detailed. That's why we had the briefing session last week, to try and spend time with members of the board to get to a shared understanding. There's a lot of assumptions that we need to make because there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of budget decisions or indeed the allocations from national, UK and Scottish Government.
Thank you both.
Okay, thank you. Okay, online we've got David Hearn.
Thank you. Stephen mentioned the PCIF underspend, and given the previous item about delegated authority, I thought it was just worth highlighting. This is a real area that we, with delegated authority, could try and influence more. And I think it's worth us being very clear about it. Last year, the PCIF spend for Scotland was 155 million. There was an underspend of around 50 million in that, and that's now been clawed back by the government. And of course, underspends sound good sometimes to accountants, but that underspend is work and support for general practice and for the patients in Falkirk that never came. And in Forth Valley, the underspend was around 2 million. There's lots of reasons for that: recruitment and retention of staff, HR processes, the difficult and intense environment that we ask people to work in primary care. And I think this is one area that we can focus on, and trying to make sure that in future years there isn't an underspend, that we identify the reasons for an underspend and try and ensure there isn't, because of course that's an underspend on clinicians that should be out in Forth Valley delivering care to our population. Thank you.
Stephen, yes, please.
Fully agree with David on that one. What we have seen in previous years with Primary Care Improvement Plan is underspending each year, and rather than, as David says, leave them to accumulate in reserves, we've tried to over-recruit against our various work streams. The challenge often, David, has been the actual staffing availability to recruit to. So even with an over-recruitment policy, we've still managed to have year-end underspends on Primary Care Improvement Plan, and certainly in other areas too, but just using that as an example. So that's the challenge. Where we see a situation developing as we go through the year, we can see if it's heading towards an underspend or if we need to take actions if it's overspending, and we can try to react to that. But part of the challenge has certainly been the labour market and the availability of staff. Hopefully that just adds a bit extra explanation to David's comments.
Okay, thanks. David, anything else you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I would say from an accounting point of view, we've been really, really proactive, and as Stephen says, over-recruiting with the expectation that that everyone won't stay. I think we need to identify what the other, HR processes, delays in getting staff into posts. I think there are other things that we can address beyond over-recruitment plans. But Stephen's absolutely right. The labour market isn't out there, and we have to become the most attractive place for everyone to come and work in. That is for sure. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, David. Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thanks, Stephen, for the report. There are so many moving parts. It's such a complex position. Even halfway through the financial year, there are still so many uncertainties. Can I just agree absolutely with your point on the risk share agreement? I think with the complexity of the situation and money moving both ways between the IGB and the constituent authorities, I think it's imperative that we do sort that out so that we know we're all working to the same assumptions, which I think we are, but it's always nice to nail these things down, especially, as I say, given that we are now into the second half of the financial year. On the clawback of COVID reserves, this is an interesting position from Scottish Government perspective, because effectively they've given money out last financial year and are claiming it back in this financial year, so have effectively managed to find a way to move money forward in their own budget from one financial year to another. I know there are rules around what we can claim, but I mean, I assume we are doing all we can to maximise the spend and therefore minimise the amount that we have to give back, because I always have a real aversion to giving money back to funders where it can never be avoided. And my final point was on the issue around the Falkirk Council Pay Award. I'm not sure I fully understand the terms of that, but I know there is some negotiation still to go on. So can I simply ask that we have a report back to IGB on the results of that negotiation when the matter's concluded? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Stephen, anything you want to come back in on them there? Note the points that Gordon has made.
Yeah, I've certainly taken a note of the points, Gordon, thank you. Absolutely, we do need to nail down the risk share, and ideally not just for this year, but to have clarity for all future years so that we're not in this position year on year. In terms of the clawback of reserves, we will try to maximise our spend. What Scottish Government does is there's monthly returns going back to Scottish Government. They are reviewing the returns from each IGB, and they're doing a form of benchmarking, making sure that the figures feel correct, and where they feel that any figures are high, they're coming back and challenging us on those figures. So we will certainly add some level of caution into our figures, because we certainly don't want to be short of reserve. We don't want to pass back more than we actually need. So it's a two-way process, but I've certainly so far tried to remain cautious in my forecast for the rest of the year, because it's not a constant position. There is a level of fluctuation, particularly in terms of provider relief, where the guidance has changed over the course of the year. In terms of the SGC pay awards, we can certainly report back as the matter progresses.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, Gordon, thank you. Last but not least, Councillor Colley.
Thank you. It does seem that the only thing certain is uncertainty.
Yeah.
within budgeting at the moment, and you know, I take the point about, you know, it is really challenging around clawback of some of the COVID reserves in particular, but I think across, I think any of us in any part of the system, it's a really challenging time. So I think it's really sensible to look at that cost of living reserve. I think that's a really positive plan to be able to look at, to try and account as best we can for some of the uncertainties around inflation and energy, etc. So I think that's a really positive recommendation. I also briefly wanted to touch on the Oakbank housing development. And I you know, I don't think this is particularly contentious because it's HRA money. It can only be used on support around people who are council tenants, so it can only be used in particular circumstances anyway. And across the district, we're crying out for this type of housing. You know, people across the district really need this, and it really will support people to stay as independent as they can, and you know, the things that we want to achieve in our strategic plan around the best outcomes for individuals. So I think I'm really positive about supporting that, and you know, hopefully, you know, we look at, you know, this is part of prevention as well, you know, having people in the right housing and having that available is great. So I just wanted to note my support around that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Colley. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, colleagues. So in terms of the recommendations, are we content to note items 2.1 to 2.4 and to approve items 2.5 to 2.7? I see no no's, so I'm assuming that's a yes for everyone. So thank you very much. That will be minuted. Okay, that then takes us on to item 8, which is the business case. Now you will recall we did have a session, I think it was last week, where we discussed this in detail, but I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who will, was it yourself, Patricia? Sorry.
Introduce it.
I'm going to hand over to Patricia first. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I should have given you advance notice of that. And I just thought it was important that I set a bit of context. A number of you came to a briefing session last week, which we organised to be able to give you at a slower pace a more detailed walkthrough of the business case. We've touched on some of the known unknowns or uncertainties and some of the assumptions within this report. But I think it's really important to remember our role as an integration joint board in terms of the integration of health and social care services, but that we're not just a partnership of a council and health board. We're really a partnership with our carers, with our communities, with our people who use our services. And we know it's been well trailed and referenced this morning that we're entering a really difficult winter in a number of fronts in terms of cost of living, potential for power outages, strikes, etc. So it's really important that we are investing our money and our resources in the right areas, that we're continuing to support. We invest about £3.2 million recurringly every year in a range of third sector, community providers and services. And it's really important that we remember our role in working with our third sector and communities to help build community capacity and resilience at this time. So I just thought it was really important to just touch base on that. We've talked about primary care, we've talked about community hospitals and how we need to extend our capacity at the moment to help meet some of the demands that are within our communities, but also within the acute hospital site. So just wanted to give that bit of context. This business case, for colleagues who are new to the board meeting, sets out the position, the anticipated position for the next financial year, and it's then used as part of our negotiation with the council and with the health board, and is subject to their budget processes to get to an end position. So I'll hand over to Stephen, who will outline some of the key points. We know that a number of you have already had the detail, but I'll hand over to Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 8 is the business case. The report presents the 2023-24 business case, which summarises IGIB's funding requirements and financial planning assumptions for the forthcoming financial year. It forms the basis of initial negotiations with both Falkirk Council and NHS Forth Valley regarding the level of payments for 2023-24. Preparation of the business case is a key requirement of the IGIB's integration scheme, and section 3.2 just notes that the business case reflects the most up-to-date information available at point in time. It does caveat the planning assumptions included within the business case because there is still a lot of planning uncertainty within the system, and already the report there referred to the UK government's planned funding announcement for next year, and we know since the report has been written, the funding announcement happened yesterday. Just to use that as an illustration, if there's a level of protection for both health budgets and social care budgets, then once we see the detail of that, that helps us understand better what that means for Scottish Government, but is then Scottish Government's decision how they allocate not just the money for health and social care, but the rest of their budget. So there's still that two-tier approach, and so there's still a level of uncertainty until at least after the 15th of December announcement and the detail that follows from that. So lots of uncertainty in terms of planning for what that means specifically for the partnership. In terms of funding uplifts, section 3.3 of the report refers to our assumptions, our working assumptions for the funding uplift for the health budgets, where we're assuming a 2% uplift. We're also assuming that external provider inflation in respect of the national living wage will be funded through the health portfolio, and will come to us for that too. Section 3.4 of the report refers to the local authority position, where it's assumed that any ongoing integration and funding transfer from that health portfolio to local government will be passed on in full to the IGB in line with Scottish Government guidance. The budget settlement for 2022-23 from Falkirk Council, so that's the current year, included a non-recurring contribution of £1.8 million. So that funding won't be available to us next year. And generally it's assumed that Falkirk Council, it's assumed that Falkirk Council, I beg your pardon, will pass on the social care element of the current year pay award, the contribution from Scottish Government. But beyond that, we are assuming a flat cash settlement from Falkirk Council. So same budget as we've got currently. I touched on it in the finance report that so far, in terms of that current year pay award, Falkirk Council has indicated that they won't be passing the funding on, but what I've seen so far only refers to the current year, and so there are still negotiations. Negotiations are ongoing anyway, so both in terms of the current year and in terms of next year. But in terms of this report, I've assumed that the funding from Scottish Government will be passed on. And you'll see that later on in the report. But again, these are all assumptions, and as such, they carry an element of risk. For next year's pay costs, for all areas, I've assumed a 2% uplift, which is in line with medium-term financial planning modelling. And it may not be that way in the end, but I think if we stick with the approach of the medium-term financial plan with the 2%, then there's more of an emphasis on Scottish Government to support any gap between the 2% and what the final pay award is. Whereas if we at this stage assume more than 2%, it puts that emphasis on us to try and deliver the financial gap. So that's the logic behind the 2% rise in pay costs. Section 3.6 of the paper just again comes back to the current year pay awards, which don't just affect this year, but also future years. And it highlights that for the Agenda for Change, for the medical staffing, it is a working assumption that there will be no impact next year because that will be fully funded through the Scottish Government. The figures for the SGAC pay award are noted in 3.6. The Scottish Government funding, if we receive it, would not cover the full SGAC pay award. It would provide funding of just under £1.2 million with an estimated unbudgeted cost of £1.7 million. So even without that funding, there would be a £572,000 gap. Without it, it would be the full £1.745 million gap. Section 3.7 refers to contractor uplifts linked to both national living wage and non-pay inflationary pressures. 3.8 refers to inflationary assumptions for commissioning costs of healthcare and voluntary sector services. Section 3.10 touches on other inflation. Skipping through this fairly quickly now. 3.13 refers to the business case earmarked investment, and a number of cost pressures and new developments have been funded within the business case from earmarked funds, in particular our winter pressure funding, which we also saw in the last finance report, and these are outlined in paragraphs 3.14 through to 3.18. Section 4 of the report refers to progress with the new 3-year strategic plan, which it's essential the finance plan links in with. And section 5 of the report pulls together all the assumptions so far that I've just tried to very hastily outline. So referring to table 1, total additional expenditure for next year is estimated to be in the region of £14.654 million. This compares to an estimated available funding uplift of £4.280 million. So the gap between our estimated cost pressures and our estimated uplifts from partners will be £10.374 million. Now, those figures are put in context in table 2 or in section 5.2 in terms of what that means relative to the overall budget. If I can just go back to table 1 for a moment, I thought it would be worth highlighting just a couple of these figures, because all of these figures are best estimates at this point in time, but they all contain an element of risk. So just as I mentioned, we're assuming 2% uplift from NHS. That's equivalent to £2.641 million. If that happened to be 1%, 0%, 4%, then obviously that changes the position. So it's just to highlight the sort of magnitude of risk with that. Within the table, it's not explicit from the notes beforehand. The transfer from health portfolio of £2.266 million and the social care provider uplift of £4.191 million are interrelated. So I'm assuming that we will increase the payments to our providers, both in terms to allow them to pay the national living wage and to meet their non-pay inflationary pressures as well. In terms of the national living wage element, I'm assuming that will be funded by Scottish Government, as has been the assumption in previous years. So I'm assuming 2.266 million of the 4.191 million cost will be funded from Scottish Government. So again, it's big figures, and that's why I wanted to tease them out to you. I noted in yesterday's announcement that the national living wage will work from £9.50 to £10.42. That probably means I need to change these figures already in the table and put in a bit more for the national living wage. But it will both increase the income and the expenditure, so it'll have no impact on the bottom line, assuming that Scottish Government does fund that as suggested. Just to highlight again, the £1.8 million in the table was non-recurring funding for the current year only, so that comes out. And just the last line in table 1, the 2022-23 recurring pressures, including set aside, there's a figure of £3.853 million. That will change as the current year goes on, possibly not change if our forecasts are 100% accurate. That's a combination of both set aside forecast overspend pressures and prescribing overspend pressures in the current year. So we need to manage our overall budget to accommodate current pressures as well. Hopefully that's as clear as it can be. Section 5.3 just highlights that further negotiations with partners will be required in relation to level of funding contribution for next year and the realistic application of savings targets if financial balance is to be delivered. And as it shows in the tables, we've got that 10.3 million gap prior to delivery of savings. 5.4 refers to the set aside custom and practice and the risk associated with that, and again stresses the need to finalise the integration scheme. I guess we've already spoken about that in the last report. Section 6 addresses next year's efficiency savings. These are summarised in table 3 with further details contained within appendix 1. It's worth noting that due to the capacity challenges in the current financial year, that impacted on delivery of current year savings programmes, and a number of the initiatives have been carried that are in appendix 1 have been continued in the current financial year. The majority of the proposals are considered high risk at this stage, and they are subject to further feasibility analysis and scoping work, and in some cases associated with partner approval. For example, the income generation proposals involving residential charges will require the approval, and they will flow from the approval of inflationary increases set by Falkirk Council, not by us. Section 7 of the report very briefly touches on the expected capital funding available for next year. In 7.2, I've also noted that in addition to next year's capital funding, there's another £3.5 million in future years, 2024-5 and 2025-6, in respect of the new intermediate care facility. So I appreciate that's quite a quick canter through that report, but if I can go back to the recommendation, it is to approve the business case to inform initial negotiations with Falkirk Council and NHS Forth Valley in respect to the level of payment for the 2023-24 financial year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I've got a question this time. I just want to check I've got something right. So I think what you've said is that as far as we're aware, NHS Forth Valley will give you the 2%, I think is what you said, in terms of a pay uplift. Is that right? But there is some question over whether or not Falkirk Council will give us the social care element of the SGIC pay award. Is that where we're at?
Okay, so
Just want to be clear in my head.
yes, thank you. So in years gone past, NHS budgets, the health budgets, so they lose their identity when we receive them.
Yeah.
But until that point in time, there's an amount of money comes from the health board, comes from the council. In the past, the health board budget will have been blanket increased by a percentage. It's not something that the Director of Finance determines. It's usually something that's determined nationally. So they will write to the health board and say you pass over X amount, and that is what the health board has to pass over. So I'm assuming a 2% uplift at this point in time until Scott Urquhart receives that notification from the Scottish Government, and the health budget planning tends to be that bit later on in the year, then that assumption could be flawed. And obviously with the 15th of December Scottish Government announcement, with the impact from yesterday's announcement that flows through to Scotland, that 2% could be too little or it could be too much. I think 2% is what we received in the previous year.
Okay, but whatever goes to the NHS then simply transfers to the IGB.
Yes.
Based on guidance from the government.
Yeah.
So what's different then in terms of this? And I appreciate this is a small element of the budget, but it's important. So how is that different from then the pay award that comes from Falkirk Council?
Okay, so for the councils, not just Falkirk, but councils as a whole, what has happened in the past is Scottish Government has again directed that the councils must pass over a flat cash budget.
Right, okay.
So there's no obligation on them to pass over any increased funding in terms of the letter that they receive.
Right.
But in the past, the council would have made some form of contribution to pay uplifts. If there's no increase from Falkirk Council at all, then essentially all of our inflationary pressures on the social care budget have to be managed within the IGB.
Okay, right. That's fine. That
2% for the pay award that I've assumed in terms of cost. So that's in terms of the income.
Okay.
Then in terms of the cost, I'm assuming 2% because that's what we've used in long-term financial plans in the past. I think tactically it's wise to use 2% because in the past, in the year that we're currently in, Scottish Government will meet the gap for the health pay awards that are above 2% because that's what they expected us to move on. So if the pay award happens to be 7%, then that extra 5% Scottish Government will meet via the health boards to pass the funding on to us for our share of services.
But if we're in a position where you didn't get, I think we did say 1.8 million or something from Falkirk Council, then the IGB would have to find that one.
Okay, so last year, at this same exercise, the Falkirk Council provided £1.8 million worth of funding to support the partnership and to bridge that gap between our inflationary pressures and the flat budget.
Okay.
They provided that funding non-recurrently, so it was a one-off. Whereas obviously our costs are not one-off. So essentially it gave us an extra year to then find that £1.8 million. We now have to, in the current year, we've got that money available to us. It won't be there next year. So we start off 1.8 million less unless we can find measures to bridge that gap.
I think that is a key point, that it's a staffing budget and it's a recurring cost. And for me, it's a matter of principle that it's in council employees. So it's something which I'd expect will be subject to further discussion with the council.
Excuse me, we will get a report back here then. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, just me unusually asking a question. I'll give you a second. If there are no hands up, then we'll simply just move to the recommendations. I suppose with this paper, as has already been said, we all had time to really look at it in detail. So in terms of the recommendations then, the board is asked to approve the business case to inform the negotiations with our partners, Falkirk Council and NHS Forth Valley. So unless I see anything to indicate otherwise, for the purpose of the minutes, it will be noted that the board has approved this. Thank you very much. And that then takes us on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the Strategic Risk Management Performance Report from... No, it doesn't. It takes us on to 10. No, it does take us on to 9. Sorry, I'm getting carried away with myself here. Apologies, colleagues. So number 9 on the agenda, and Stephen, that is yourself again.
Yes. Can I just check if Hugh Coyle don't mind? Yes. If it's okay, Chair, Hugh Coyle would like to present this report. He's the Falkirk Council Risk Manager.
That's perfect. Welcome, Hugh.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm having some problems with my camera, but I'll do my best.
Hugh, we can't see you, but we can hear you, so that's the important part.
Okay, thank you. So this is the first risk management performance report, which we presented to Audit Committee last month. This report covers, I think, a 15-month period, and future reports we plan to do on an annual basis at the same time as the annual governance statement, which is, I think, either in March or June. This report gives a summary of the activity already undertaken to manage risk, both at a partnership level and also within both partners. As you'll see from the report, there was an internal audit of risk management which provided limited assurance. However, various other reports that are provided to IJB and partners do provide substantial assurance, in particular the annual governance statements. It should also be recognised that although IJB risk management action plan is still being implemented, where we're trying to join up arrangements at a partnership level, each individual partner does have well-developed operational risk management arrangements, so risk is being managed on the ground. You'll also see in the appendices that we've included a copy of the risk management action plan, and we are progressing that. Myself, Stephen and Sarah, who's also on the call from NHS, have regular meetings also with Suzanne Thompson, and we are making good progress in taking the plan forward. However, I would also emphasise that whilst at the moment we're making good progress in building the structures, we are going to need a lot of input from the leadership team in the first part of next year to start making sure that we improve the strategic risk register, making sure in particular it's got more clear actions, and also that we start to link together exception reports of NHS and council risk to make sure that anything feeds into the IJB as necessary. We're also going to be arranging training with the board and managers to make sure that the plan and strategy is implemented. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hugh. I mean, it's actually good to see that progress is being made. Colleagues, do we have any questions for Hugh this morning? No, we don't have any questions. Steve, I don't know if there's anything you wish to add to that, or if Hugh's covered everything that needs to be covered.
No, I'm sure Hugh's covered all that's required for today. It's worth noting that this performance report was essentially a recommendation from the internal audit review of our risk management processes. And Hugh's already mentioned it, we were required to produce a risk management action plan. As part of that, this ticks off one of the actions to make us compliant. We will do an annual performance report in future. As Hugh says, that will come to the June board meeting each year. So this is an unusual report in that it covers more than a 1 year period. Future reports we just cover in 1 year at a time, and that will be part of our assurance framework to make sure that we're doing things as effectively as possible.
No, thanks. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Hugh. I don't see any questions from colleagues. I'm going to give them just another second. Absolutely nothing. Okay, so this paper was for consideration and comment. So can we just minute it that we have considered the paper and note that future reports will cover, as it says on the paper, the period of April to March annually and will be submitted to the IJB's Audit Committee alongside the annual governance statement. Okay, thank you very much. Now let me see if I can get the next item right. So I do believe we're now on to item 10, and we will have a short break after this item because I think it sounds like I need it even if no one else does. Item 10, which is the IJB Risk Management and Strategy, and is it Sarah that will be presenting this today?
Sarah McKenzie.
Sarah, run it again. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so yeah, as we've kind of already alluded to in the report for the performance report there, the internal audit review of the risk management arrangements noted that there were areas in which the risk strategy itself could also be developed. Therefore, in conjunction with the IJB Chief Financial Officer, myself as the NHS Forth Valley Corporate Risk Manager, and Hugh as the Falkirk Council Corporate Risk Coordinator, we redrafted the strategy to align it with the NHS Forth Valley strategy and incorporating the necessary elements from the Falkirk Council Corporate Risk Policy as well. So the following areas from the audit recommendations have been incorporated into the redrafted strategy. We've now tailored it to the requirements of an IJB by providing some clarity around the responsibility for operational risks. We've included some definitions around strategic risks and the other relevant types of risks, such as clinical risk. We have now included some high-level assurance principles. Roles and responsibilities, including those of the IJB and the Audit Committee in relation to the oversight of the risk management arrangements, are included, and the process for the reporting and review of the strategic risk register as well. We've also included a framework for risk appetite, but it should be noted that that's the framework itself. We do need to go on to set the risk appetite and tolerance levels and draft the statements themselves. So we're asking the board today to note that there are further improvements that we wish to make, and the detail of which is going to be informed by some of these other pieces of work that we're going to be undertaking as part of that risk management action plan as well. So for example, once the appetite and tolerance statements are agreed, we'll include them in, and we'll include further additional detail around the processes for the review and reporting of operational risks, providing detail on the mechanisms for provision of assurance to the Audit Committee and the board as well. So as Hugh mentioned there, we need to look at that exception reporting to make sure that any risks that sit currently with the NHS or the council are cross-reported into the IJB where it's relevant. The strategy was endorsed by the Audit Committee at the end of September for onward consideration by the board today. We already plan to review the strategy at the end of the financial year with a view to submitting updates to the IJB in September next year. So that will be incorporating some of those things that we're already noticing that could be done to the strategy to improve it further. Thank you. So that's all I wish to say. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments for Sarah? No, we do not. Oh, Councillor Colley.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say thank you for this, and you know, it's really both reports around risk are really important, and to have that coordination across all of the IJB and both bodies, I think, you know, it will help us manage the risks that we have, and I think the work around risk appetite and tolerance, I think, is really important, you know, by the nature of some of the pressures and the nature of the activity itself. There are some risks that will remain high risk, but potentially are risks that we can tolerate because the areas of work that we need to do. So I'm looking forward to that being part of it as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for Fiona. Thank you, Fiona. Do we have any other questions or comment? We absolutely do not. Okay, in terms of the recommendations then, this for a decision, as Sarah has already stated. So for the purposes of the minutes, are we happy to approve the enclosed risk management strategy And also note that further amendments will be made to the strategy in due course. Yes, we are. Okay, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us for this item today. Okay, colleagues, I think we will take a 5-minute comfort break. We will come back at 11. Oh, it's just 11:20 exactly. So 11:25. So that will give you time to go off and make a cuppa and things like that. We'll see you then. Okay. Switching. Is anyone want a cup of tea? I'll go get some from there.
Things to remember.
Welcome back, colleagues and colleagues. Apologies for our taking slightly longer. I just need to check something. We've been made aware that there might be a bit of a sound issue. Is everyone? Are you all hearing the meeting properly? We're just trying to determine if it's just in this building or if it's across the meeting. No, Fiona, Sarah. So I think it's fine. So it must just be this building then. Okay. If we can then move on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the slow stream rehabilitation bedded care paper, and I believe the head of integration, who is Gail, will present this paper to us this morning. I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues will be aware of the significant challenges that exist across our system, resulting in many people not being in the most appropriate place for their care needs. So you'll be aware there's a number of different actions that we're undertaking to try and address this, and the creation of slow stream rehabilitation beds is one of the actions that we're undertaking. So this paper brings forward the information about how we're progressing that. We do know that we do have rehabilitation beds already available in our care homes, and rehabilitation care is also provided through our community hospitals. We know from data that people are needing an increased length of time required in reablement, and at the moment most of those people would stay in our community hospitals or indeed be in the acute hospital waiting to go into a community hospital. Being in a hospital environment when clinical care isn't required isn't the best place for people to be. It's much better if they can be in a more homely environment to support the practicing of domestic tasks, for example, and to support that transition home as soon as possible. So an options appraisal was carried out to identify how we might meet this gap in Falkirk, and a business case was then developed setting out the implications and what would be required to deliver that. So the paper before you sets out the various options that were considered and how they were scored. I won't go through the detail of that, but you can see how the approach that was taken in relation to identifying the preferred solution for this. So Cunningham House, which is one of our internal care homes, was identified as a suitable place to transition to provide slow stream rehabilitation bedded care. I think it's really important to recognise that the people currently in Cunningham House, that is their home. They are in that long-term care home, and there's no proposal that we would disrupt that living arrangement. So people will continue to live in Cunningham House for as long as they need that provision. However, it is proposed that we would gradually transition Cunningham House to provide the facilities to provide slow stream rehabilitation care. That would include some improvements to the facilities, including creating a gymnasium area and also the recruitment of additional support staff, including allied health professional staff. The additional improvements that are being put in place will not only benefit new people that come into the care home to receive that slow stream rehabilitation care, also benefit the current residents in the care home. Through our engagement and consultation process, we have met with the staff who are in the facility, and again it's really important to stress that there's no proposed changes to the existing staffing establishment, with the exception of adding in more staff or any changes in terms and conditions. We've also we invited the residents and their families along to meet with us to speak about the proposal and to find out from their perspectives how we can best support their relatives during the transition. And we continue to engage with staff, service users and their families as well. We also met with IJB members and elected members, and we also met with trade unions to make sure that we're understanding different views from across the system. So I would say that most of the feedback from the consultation has been really quite positive, and families, for example, that we spoke to articulated how they actually saw benefits to their relatives in terms of that mixed model of care, and in particular in terms of the additional resources that will be available to their relatives. There are some concerns that we have heard, and those concerns tend to relate to will their family member be moved. So we're providing that reassurance. There's no intention to move anybody from the facility. It is their home, and that's really important to recognise. There's concerns that it might turn into a more clinical facility, but again, we're reassuring that the whole purpose of using a care home environment is the homeliness that it creates, and that beneficial arrangement which for people who don't need clinical care, that's better than receiving the rehabilitation in a hospital environment. So it's really important to stress that the transition will be handled sensitively. The staff who work at Cunningham House are really good, and they've got really good relationships with the service users and their families. And we expect those relationships will continue to be really good as we transition. We will take the same approach as we currently take in terms of looking at when there is a vacancy available, who might be suitable to come in and move into that vacant room. And that takes cognizance of other needs of people within the care home, as well as the person that might be coming into that. So that approach will continue through the transition. So this was approved under the Chief Officer's delegated authority, and the IGAB today is asked to note the options appraisal and business case that's been developed to support the delivery of bedded care rehabilitation services for people who required that extended period of rehabilitation in a homely setting in the local community, and to note that the business case has been approved by the Chief Officer under her delegated authority in consultation with the IGAB Chair and Vice Chair. Work is now underway to implement the plans. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gail. And colleagues, do we have any questions for Gail? No, it doesn't look like we do. I think the report's fairly straightforward, very much outlines, Gail, what the intention is, and I can confirm on behalf of myself and Fiona that we were very much involved in the discussions with Patricia around this. So for the purposes of minutes then, this is a paper that just simply requires us to consider and comment. For the purposes of the paper then, and for the minutes, can we just then simply note down that we agree with, are we happy to note the options appraisal and business case in terms of recommendation 2.1, and we also note 2.2 as well. Okay, thank you very much. That then takes us on to, thank you, Gail, that then takes us on to item 12 on the agenda, which is Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Report for 2022 to 23 and the Progress Report from 2017 to 2021. And I believe Suzanne Thompson, who is our Governance Service Manager, will be presenting this morning.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our report is quite a title, so it's presented today to you today to look for approval in terms of the content of the report for 2022 to 23, and we've also included within the report a progress update, and that's covering the period of our first Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Report for 2017 to 2021. So the background section 3 of the report summarises our legal duties on the board as a public body, and we're required to publish an Equalities and Mainstreaming Report. We're required to include within that a set of equality outcomes every 4 years, and to report on progress every 2 years within that period. And just to note that officers have recently attended 2 workshops that have been hosted by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, and these sessions have been really helpful and certainly informed our work plan and the report that's presented to you today. So in relation to our equality outcomes for 2022-23, we've noted in the report that a public consultation has been completed. This was specifically to seek views on extending the 6 current equality outcomes for a further year. We've received 8 responses and on the basis of feedback there were no changes made to these, and these are included in the report itself, and we've also included a summary of the consultation that was completed and the feedback from that. So these outcomes we're proposing are carried forward and are included in the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Report, which is attached to Appendix 1. So this draft mainstreaming report includes it sets out our legislative context. It sets out the benefits of setting equality outcomes. We're required to include an update around the profile of the board and its membership, and we're also noting how we as a board can mainstream equality in the work that we do. At section 3 of the mainstreaming report, we've provided a summary of the work that we've done to date to achieve our equality outcomes. Much of that's been reported to the board in terms of reports and as well as our annual performance report over the period. And as we've noted earlier, findings from the consultations included within that report. So this is presented to the board for consideration and approval. The board report also sets out ongoing work to develop our new quality outcomes for 4 years, and that's from 2023. And we recognised, I think, in earlier updates that were provided to the board that this approach would present an opportunity to align to our new strategic plan, our quality outcomes, as well as the opportunity to take account of the emerging evidence that was coming through our strategic needs assessment and any sort of nationally published data and information. So these equality outcomes will be developed, consulted on and presented to the board for approval in June 2023. And considering the board's meeting timescales and the required work that we're needing to do over that time frame, with the reports also asking for delegated authority to complete this work within those sorts of proposed timescales. So in conclusion, the report provides assurance to the board that the necessary work has been done or is planned to ensure compliance with our public sector equality duty and our Scottish specific duties. And just taking back to the recommendations, the board is asked to approve the recommendations at section 2, namely 2.1, to approve the qualities outcome and mainstreaming report for 2022 to 23 and the progress report. And we just note that if it's approved today, officers will then publish this on our website and will notify the Qualities and Human Rights Commission of that work being done. Recommendation 2.2 to delegate authority to officers to develop and consult on a new set of equality outcomes. And at 2.3 to note a report on these outcomes, and our new mainstreaming report will be presented to the board for approval in June 2023. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, do we have any questions for Suzanne? Patricia?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I should have picked this up previously, Suzanne. Section 3.7, partnership funding, the table at the bottom of page 172. Just wait till you find it. Yeah, it's just that top line, it's not labelled. And the line underneath it says men. It's not clear what that top line is.
Okay, I'll have a look at that and we can amend that before publication.
Great, thank you. Okay, well spotted, Patricia. Anything else, colleagues? No.
Sorry, could I?
Oh, sorry.
About the consultation. When you said how it was publicised, but eight responses doesn't seem very high for a a consultation on a matter of this level of importance. For future consultations, I wonder if it would be possible to do a bit more in terms of publication of it to try and ensure that as many people as possible are aware of it and can respond to it. And I do have a thing about only using social media for consultations. I think it's important that we use different methods.
Absolutely, and thank you for that comment, Councillor Hannah. I think certainly the period that we went out for consultation was also a time that we were out consulting on the strategic plan, and there was a number of other sort of consultations out at the same time. But that's, I think, they recognise the importance of aligning this work to our strategic plan work and consultation. And certainly, I think within the Chief Officer report, we'd noted that we would certainly be targeting our protected characteristic groups a bit more in terms of our strategic plan work and the work that we need to do to complete our equalities impact assessment around that, but also to dovetail some of that work in a deeper dive around our equality outcomes. So I would assure you we'll be doing our best to try and make that as meaningful as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, no other questions or comments. I keep on forgetting my colleagues in the room, so apologies to them. They're all to the side of me. I'm looking at all of you on the screen. No other questions or comments from Indeed Anywhere. So in terms of this report, it was for decision. Suzanne has already gone through the recommendations, but for the purposes of the minutes, I'm just looking for agreement that we're happy to approve 2.1 to agree the item noted in 2.2 and note item 2.3. Okay, I see no objections to any of that. Thank you very much, colleagues. That then takes us on to item 13 on the agenda, which is the Falkirk Alcohol and Drug Partnership Progress Report. And I believe we have Phil Heaton here today to present this report to us.
Thank you. Here I am. Yes, hello colleagues. I'm the ADP lead officer for Falkirk, and I'll just give you a brief overview of the report and take questions afterwards. So it has been a significant year for the ADP in Falkirk, not least because of the dissolution of the previous Forth Valley ADP structure into its constituent parts, and a refocusing on the local population need. The report itself covers 4 main areas, which are the standout points of this year's progress. The first one being the MAT standards implementation. The MAT standards are a set of 10 standards that the Scottish Government have requested to be implemented across Scotland by April 2023, the first 5 of them, that is. They are intended to enable people to get quick access to treatment, including methadone and buprenorphine substance use services, and also about the quality of the service that they receive. So you'll see from the report that a number of steps have been taken towards that. In Falkirk, we are working closely with NHS Forth Valley and Claxon Stirling ADP to deliver on the MAT standards, and we are expected to be able to deliver the first 5 on time by April 2023, which is in line with the government expectation. There is quite a significant governance structure that's been developed around the MAT standards to enable reporting through to IJBs and also through to MAT standard steering groups. And there is also quite a significant amount of government interface that the ADPs are leading on there as well. So that's a big piece of work, but it's coming along as expected, and hopefully the report will give you some detail on that. The other major aspect of the ADP work this year, and will take us into next year, is the recommissioning of the third sector contract. The third sector providers that deliver services across Forth Valley are currently CGL, Change Grow Live, and they are we've entered into the first of a potential 2-year extension period with them. By September of next year, the plan is that we will have had a retendering exercise, and we are in the process at the moment of working with Claxon Stirling ADP to develop a commissioning consortium to enable that to happen. And again, happy to take questions on that. Again, these two aspects of the ADP's work are very significant and could impact quite heavily on the treatment system in Falkirk. The ADP as a whole has had a lot of requests recently from Scottish Government on reporting. So we've had a number of different reports that have had to go through to the government. They've all been submitted on time, and the government is in the process of reviewing them and will get back to us once that is complete. It does kind of nod to the fact that the focus has been quite heavy on ADPs recently with the national mission monies and the MAT standards development, and there is an expectation from government that chief officers are aware and involved in a lot of the work of the ADP, more so than they have been in the past. So to address that, we are in the ADP looking at developing the governance structures and also developing the strategies within the ADP as well, to better include partners and to ensure that deliverables are met. So that's the meat of the report. There is other aspects of ADP work that has been ongoing, such as residential rehab pathways and naloxone and harm reduction provision. But those are the major issues that I've pointed out to you. The recommendations are that the board notes the activity and achievements of the Falkirk Alcohol and Drug Partnership over the last year, and I'm happy to take questions.
Phil, thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any questions or comments for Phil on this? Patricia?
Just to say it's a good piece of work, and we know we've got a lot more to do, but made good progress, as Phil said. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, Phil, thank you for coming along to present this. And in terms, oh, Sarah, sorry, I didn't see your hand there. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Right. I wonder if you wanted to type your question in. Is that okay? And I'll give you a little second to do that. No pressure. And I'll just see if there are any other colleagues who want to come in. I think Councillor Colley would like to come in, save the day.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what Patricia said. I mean, it's really, really important work and really important in developing and moving forward in the development of the MAT standards implementation, and also the work with the third sector, with the Change Grow Live, who did some really excellent work, particularly over the pandemic, and in supporting people during that time. So I just wanted to say thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. And we've also got Margot. Margot, are you with us?
It was just to express gratitude for the work which is going on and for coming back to tell us, because it's always quite inspiring against a sort of backdrop of national, not failure, but inadequacy to deal with the problem. I think we're taking some very interesting steps, and I'm always glad to hear about them.
Thank you, Margot. I think Sarah is furiously typing something, so we'll just give it a wee. Here we are. Okay, so firstly, obviously, Sarah's apologising that there seems to be some issue with the technology and it had been fine before. But I guess what Sarah's saying is she wanted to acknowledge the work and the meeting the timescales. Appendix 1, I think at 2.4. Sarah sort of talked about the work that we're doing with the recovery community, given its importance. Sarah, I hope I've done your comment justice, and I'm not. I think just it's recognition of the work that Phil and his colleagues have undertaken.
Can I just jump in there, because the
you have a question? Apology about this. There is a question for Phil. So Phil, but I'm going to let you jump in.
Thank you. The recovery community is thriving across Forth Valley and in Falkirk as well, and there is a lot of plans from the ADP to enhance that work. It's one of the key features is to try and bring the voice of lived and living experience into the strategic development of the ADP. This is something that I did in my previous role over in Fife ADP in the development of a lived experience panel, and it's something that's very high on my priority over here as well. I want to see lived experience at the heart of everything that we do, and influencing strategy and development. And I think that it's important that we get that right, and we acknowledge the work of the recovery community to date, because it's, to be frank, it's being used as a blueprint across Scotland for the Forth Valley recovery community. It was one of the first, and it remains one of the best.
That's certainly good to hear. In terms of Sarah's question, I think it was on in your appendix, and it's item, it's 2.4. And which is, please can you set out the areas of delivery where you've had effective arrangements and so on. I think Sarah's question is related to the work that's being done with the recovery community, given its importance. I don't know if you want to add. I'm not necessarily interpreting this terribly well. I wonder if you wanted to pick up with Sarah about this offline. That might be best.
Yeah,
I feel like
absolutely happy to do that. Yeah.
my duties in terms of what the question is here. Thank you very much. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. And I would also like to say thank you for this report. Really glad to see the progress that's being made. It's a very important matter. Also, wonder if you might say a little more about 7.3 in your report. Mentioned taking some intervention training into schools, and particularly mentioning Falkirk High. I think this is an excellent idea. Raising awareness among young people of this is one of the ways that we can begin to move forward for the future. And I wonder if you'd like to say a little more about, you've obviously started with Falkirk High. Do you have further plans for taking it round all the schools in the area?
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Yeah, this is a really innovative piece of work, and it addresses a number of points that the ADP wants to make around prevention and early intervention going forward. Getting naloxone training and overdose awareness training into schools is crucial. A lot of children are affected by parental substance use and parental drug death as well. And it's an area that up until now I think has been quite controversial because we don't really, it's not a comfortable area to address with children. And I think that the work we've started in Falkirk High, I believe it was, I've not got the figures in front of me, but I think it was delivered to about 135 S6 students as part of the core curriculum that they already study. And the plan is to move that through to other schools within Falkirk. I believe Grangemouth will be the next one to go, but I will check that up and the details on that. It's going to form part of a wider piece of work around naloxone and overdose prevention training across Falkirk and the development of a new naloxone strategy for Falkirk as well. So there's, again, as Patricia says right at the start, there's a significant amount of work being done, but there's even more to be done. And I think that, the ADP is now in a position to be able to tackle those with a more local facing slant.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I don't see any other hands. So this paper was brought out for consideration and comment. So in terms of your recommendation, you're looking for us simply to note the activity and achievements of the partnership. And thanks, that will be done. And thanks for coming along today. Okay, one of my favourites, item 14 on the agenda is the performance monitoring report, and I believe Callum MacDonald will present this to us today.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to members of the board. So as just said, I'm here to present the performance monitoring report. And firstly, I would just like to draw attention to section 4.3 of the cover report, which mentions the migration to a new social work system that occurred in July. That's had a knock-on impact on our ability to report on some of our indicators. And that's in relation to further data migration that is ongoing and not yet complete. And also, there is some definitional differences between the systems that we are currently working through. There's lots of work ongoing behind the scenes to assess and determine what indicators we'll be able to bring back and reproduce, but also, and excitingly for me, what alternative new indicators we can introduce. In terms of the main body of the report, performance is reported up to September 22 where possible, and gives a year-on-year comparison. There is a focus on exception reporting, and I'm now just going to take you through a few of the key highlights highlighted in section 1 of the main report. The report highlights there are continued pressures around emergency department 4-hour compliance and around delayed discharges. The September 22 compliance against the ED 4-hour access standard highlights a decrease in performance to 51.6% compared with 65% the year before. And the delayed discharge September 22 census is noted as 57 standard delays, of which 33 were delayed over 2 weeks. There was 13 guardianship or Code 9 exemptions, giving a total of 70 delays at that September census. The overall position remains under continual review, and sections 3.1 and 3.2 of the report provide further details as well as some of the actions ongoing to support these areas. The report highlights the number of complaints received across both health and social work adult services, as well as the percentage of complaints responded to within timescales and some of the main themes of the complaints received. For social work adult services, 63% of complaints in the first half of 22-23 were responded to within timescales, and for NHS services, 77.8% were responded to within timescales for the period April to August 22. The Clinical and Care Governance Committee continue to oversee complaints performance as well as monitoring the underlying themes. For social work adult services, the overall sickness absence figure for the first half of 22-23 was 11.3%, and that's compared to 11.9% in the equivalent period last year. For NHS services, the overall August 22 sickness absence position is reported as 6.47%, compared with 6.21% in August 21, so very similar. The report details the latest position for waiting times for psychological therapies, and in September 22, 62.4% of patients started treatment within 18 weeks of referral. And while that's an improvement from the previous month, it is a slight drop in performance compared with September 21, when that figure was 63.9%. The exception report at 3.7 of the full report notes some of the ongoing redesign work and some of the additional posts to support this area. In terms of recommendations, the board is asked to consider and comment on the content of the report and to note the appropriate actions continue to be taken to address the issues identified. Thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Callum, thank you very much for that. Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Hannah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this piece of work. I wanted to ask you about the significant increase in the delayed discharge that you referred to in 1.2 of the report. Has there been a kind of a good dive into the reasons for this? Do we have any clear idea why it should have, the position should have deteriorated so much?
Thank you for the question.
I think Tricia's wanting to answer it.
I'll go for it.
It's a reflection of the system pressures that we're under, and the work as detailed in the Chief Officer report. We're working with a piece of national work around discharge without delay, but also the other two high impact changes around what happens in ED in terms of triage, urgent care, urgent unscheduled care. So there's a lot of work going on. We're increasing our activity, demand is increasing, and the complexity of people coming out. So the challenge is to get flow across the whole system so that we're avoiding admissions where possible, that as soon as people are admitted, that we've got a planned date of discharge and the planning starts there, that people then are discharged on time. If they need to go to community hospital bed, that community hospital bed is available. If it's an onward journey to their own home with support or to reablement or rehab, that can happen. So it's making sure that all the transfers of care are happening in a timely manner, but we need to have flow across the whole system. And the number of AWI delays for people with incapacity is a challenge across Scotland just now. And we're in discussions with the government, who are discussing with the Mental Welfare Commission and the Equality and Human Rights Commission about actually are there other measures that we can take to help people move into another setting rather than being in an acute hospital or a community hospital bed, which we know is not optimum for people if they don't require that level of care. So there's a number of factors. We're tackling every point in the journey and every point, and we'll reduce the WIs and then suddenly there's a pop-up in another area. So it's a daily challenge. Gail Woodcock leads that, and for us working very closely with colleagues in the acute hospital site and with our own first team. But it is like spinning plates with the level of demand, also the level of capacity that we have around staffing, but also our care at home and our care home providers have the same challenges. So some of the care home beds are not available because there isn't staff, for example. So it's a movable feast at the moment, but we're making every effort. And the work around discharge without delay, which is helping with some of the hospital systems, is really starting to have traction.
And with winter pressures coming, that will exacerbate the problems.
So we have extended our capacity in terms of spot purchasing additional beds that are interim beds for people, and also block purchasing beds with some brick-arrows, and Stephen referred to that contract and the tender process earlier. But the big issue is staff across the system and having the right staff in the right place too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Okay, Councillor Colley.
It's not in the exception reporting, but I'd probably like to ask my regular question around self-directed support. I know that some of the drops, particularly in some of the other options, and I just wondered around. I know that the government has produced, I think it might be 2 sets of updated guidance around self-directed support, around options to use it as flexibly as possible, particularly given some of the challenges that you've just mentioned around hospital and other discharge. And I suppose I was just wondering about how we can increase the options available, particularly whilst there's the service pressures that we have at the moment, to use this as an opportunity to develop self-directed support further.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Who's the best person to answer that?
Margaret Petherbridge is still on the call. She was on earlier. She's not. Who's best placed to pick that up? Susanna, we need to.
Martin's here. Martin, you come.
Yeah, unfortunately Margaret had to leave, but given that we've implemented Liquid Logic, part of that system really focuses on the use of SDS now. So we are monitoring its use, and we're rolling out further training for staff. So we hope to see an improving picture in terms of its uptake over the next 12 months, which we'll be able to track. We did really focus on the use of SDS when we were designing the new system and developing it, so we hope to see significant improvements and changes. Throughout COVID, we did actually look to increase the use of SDS, but I have to say they still tended to pick the more traditional options. So I guess we do still have a lot of work to do around, I guess, that creativity that can be afforded through the use of SDS. But I guess part of the challenge goes back to the workforce challenges and the time that staff are spending with service users as a consequence of the demand. But we are really hoping that the fact that the new system really focuses on outcomes that people want to achieve rather than services that we have at hand, we'll begin to see a real difference. So hopefully next year's performance report will evidence some improvement on that, and it's work that we continue to focus on going forward. I can get some updates specifically around the new guidance and things from Margaret and pass that on to you offline, Councillor. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hannah?
You may have alluded to it there, but in terms of the new data system, will we be getting an update once the issues in 4.3 have been resolved? Will we be getting an update to the IJB rather than wait for next year's report?
I'd be happy to provide an update, Councillor. I can do that. What we are doing at the moment is working on how to best pull the data from the system. We are still seeing some teething issues with staff in terms of bedding the system in, but hopefully once we've pulled those two streams together, it will actually give us some real lifetime data, which will actually be a real significant shift for us, because managers will be able to see at the push of a button actually how performance is in specific areas, and that was part of the real benefit from this system. But I'm happy to bring an update, perhaps in a future Chief Officer's report might be better. Thanks.
And you're talking about those wide range of performance indicators, aren't you? Not just the self-directed stuff. Okay.
So the board does receive regular performance reports, so you'll get that, but Martin will add a bit more context in this, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay, so for the purpose of the minutes then, this came to committee for consideration and comment, so we are asked simply to note the content of the performance report which we have, and note the appropriate management actions continue to be taken to address any issues identified. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. That then takes us on to item 15 on the agenda, which is the IJB governance report. And I believe that will be presented this morning by David Keenan.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report provides an update on a range of governance matters which are relevant to the board. And updates presented in this board ensure the board is compliant with national legislation and guidance, board standard orders and our code of conduct. First of all, I'd like to cover IJB membership. So the IJB has a place for 2 representatives from the third sector. One of those positions had been vacant, and officers worked with CVS Falkirk Partnership Manager to develop a process to recruit to this vacancy. This was outlined in the IJB governance report, which was agreed by the board in September 2022. The recruitment process had been underway in partnership with CVS Falkirk and generated interest, with 3 nominations being received. And following the conclusion of that recruitment process, the board was asked to appoint Ian Dixon as a first sector representative. The board was also asked to appoint Elaine Love as his substitute. Work had also been underway to identify a new carer representative, and the board was asked to appoint Caroline Harrower as the carer representative. There was also a vacancy for a service user representative substitute, and through the participation and engagement work undertaken by the Health and Social Care Partnership Planning Policy and Performance Team, one service user has been identified or has identified keen interest and involvement with the IJB, and following a recruitment process to that role, the board is asked to approve Gillian Sherlock as the service user representative substitute. As Suzanne alluded to in our coverage of the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming report, there is a legislative requirement for public boards in Scotland to achieve gender representation. The Act recognises that whilst women account for 52% of the Scottish population, there is persistent and historic underrepresentation of women on public boards, and the Act requires boards to ensure that 50% of their members are women. There's regular turnover membership of the IJB, and the legislation recognises that some boards will experience regular turnover. However, subject to the appointments that I've just outlined above, we have 11 females and 9 males, so that puts us in compliance with the legislation, but this will be continued to be reviewed on a regular basis. The IJB has a responsibility to produce an annual climate change report under the Climate Change Scotland Act 2009, and as the IJB has no responsibility for staff and limited planning responsibility for buildings and fleet services, the board is asked to note that the lead officer for climate change from Falkirk Council will submit the Integration Joint Board's annual climate change report. On to section 7 of the report, we've got the proposed meeting dates for 2023. The IJB meeting dates follow a similar pattern of 4 times a year, and they always start at 9:30 AM on a Friday, incorporating a recess in July and August so we can all get away and enjoy our summer holidays. There are alternative meetings for business and board development. Following the end of the COVID-19 related social distancing restrictions, the IJB agreed at its meeting in June 2022 to meet virtually for the remainder of the year and to consult with members on future meeting arrangements. However, we have been co-located with the Chair, Vice Chair, Chief Officer, Chief Finance Officer and Councillor for the last few meetings. So as you can see below at section 7.3, we have outlined our 4 meeting dates proposed for the year and 3 board development sessions. The board's also asked to note the draft forward planner attached to Appendix 1, and this seems to map out the work of the board for the forthcoming year to ensure that all statutory deadlines are met and reports are considered at an appropriate stage. It's important to note that this isn't a finalised document, it is a live document, so the reports will crop up at various times throughout the year, but we'll continue to plan our business accordingly. The Audit Committee is going to consider its programme of meetings and indicated work plan on the 2nd of December, and the Clinical and Care Governance Committee will consider its programmes of meetings and work plan at its meeting on the 25th of November. and an overview of all the IGI meetings for 2022 pending committee approval are set out at Appendix 2. On to Section 8, proposed meeting arrangements. As some of you will be, or as all of you should be aware, aside from our newcomers, you were asked to complete a survey on your preferences for meeting arrangements, and members have overwhelmingly stated that they prefer to use a hybrid format, and this means that some will be able to join us remotely and some will be able to join us in person. Given that there's a regular turnover in membership and in line with our duty to review our EPIA regularly, we will regularly review this proposal and this method. So it's proposed that we're going to just meet on a hybrid basis for our Q1 meetings, and then we'll review thereafter to see if you wish to continue with this arrangement. Previously, the board met at Arnottdale House, which is a community-based venue. However, this venue does not have the capacity to support a hybrid meeting format. So the options that we've explored indicate that Forth Valley College is the most appropriate community-based venue that has equipment to support a hybrid meeting format. So I've been making inquiries with the college to ensure availability, and it's proposed, as I outlined earlier, that we'll meet on a quarterly basis, and this will give us the flexibility to review as required. An EPIA has been undertaken on a proposal to meet on a hybrid basis, and the assessment found there to be a neutral impact on the protected characteristics. And I would just like to draw members' attention to the qualities assessment section and the conclusions. All respondents to the meeting arrangement stated that no considerations or adjustments would need to be made for them to participate in any of the meeting formats, and no written comments were left which would indicate a negative impact on any of the protected characteristics. However, given the limited scope of the survey, members were not asked about any potential positive impacts. Therefore, using an evidence base, the impact on protected characteristics is assessed as being neutral. However, that being said, we will continue to review this EPIA in line with EHRC guidance. And now, if the board, follow the board's approval of the recommendation to meet on a hybrid basis and to use Forth Valley College, we'll also consider the impact on the public. So, sorry, I've gone through a lot of detail there, so I'll circle back to the recommendations and hand back over to the chair. So we're asking the board to approve. Or do you want to take this from here?
I can do it if you like. It says me repeating. So, okay, thank you, colleagues. Any questions or comments? No, we don't have any then. Okay, so we've got a long list here of things to be approved, noted and agreed. So are we all in agreement that we will approve 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, which is welcoming Ian, Carol Ann and Gillian onto the board in the positions that David already explained. Okay. Are we also happy to note items 2.4, 2.5 and 2.7? Yes, and I'm looking for agreement on items 2.6, which is about the timescale of the meeting, 2.8, which is that we will meet in a hybrid basis for 2023, and lastly 2.9, that all development sessions will be held in person. Yes, which I personally think will be lovely because it'll be great to actually meet you all, because I don't think I have met all of you in person. Stephen, you've got your hand up.
Michelle, just diary dates. I think we are saying Fridays, but I'm just checking ahead because I like to keep ahead of my diary. I think we're saying the 3rd of February 23 because the 2nd's a Thursday.
Right, for the board development session.
Yeah, I think they're all due to be on a Friday.
Okay, someone will check that out, Stephen, and an email will be issued. Someone can take that as an action for yourself, David, won't it? Anything else? No. Okay, fantastic. That means we now move on to the next agenda item, which is item 16, which is the HSCP comms update. And I believe we should have Paul with us this afternoon. I believe we're in the afternoon, yes, to present this.
Yes, hello, thank you, Chair.
Hi, Paul.
Hello and welcome to our new members and all members of the board. So this is my report covering media, digital and communication activity between the reporting periods, so that's July to September. So within that report, there's an update on a new cornerstone piece of comms activity. So that's our new recruitment campaign, which we've labelled A Career That Cares. I hope it comes across that I've been working with other people, and this is a piece of work that I'm quite passionate about, and I've really enjoyed pulling together. The campaign aims to promote roles and opportunities across all services, so that's across the whole health and social care partnership, no matter what employer, or even if you're in a voluntary and third sector organisation and you're contributing as a volunteer. So it aims to promote a range of roles and opportunities. So comms is really the tip of the iceberg behind this piece of work, and behind this there's also a lot of work with our HR business partner and recruitment working group, looking to streamline the hiring and onboarding process. But in the comms report, it shows how this is manifesting itself in comms and public facing activity. So given the challenges in the services, this is quite an important piece of work to promote these roles that are available, and it has had a lot of backing from leadership all the way, but even more encouragingly, it's great to see that there's backing from frontline staff, which has been fantastic to see. So in the run-up to our recruitment event, which we held in October, we had over 150 shares of content. And not to say that I'm sitting there and checking who's been sharing, but there were quite a lot of names that I recognise from frontline staff, and I think this sort of campaign also gives staff a vehicle to take pride in their work, and they really are showing that. So that's really encouraging and pleasing to see. So during the reporting period, you'll see that a fifth of all visits to the website were from social media, and I think that's been driven largely by the Career That Cares campaign. So we had over 1,000 visits to our new careers pages, and alongside that sort of online content, we had a media release to promote the in-person events. We attended a DWP Job Centre Plus recruitment event. We offered locality-based drop-in sessions for home care roles in Bowness, Grangemouth and Pullman, which is quite a targeted piece of work. We hosted our own recruitment fair in October with 15 or 16 other commission providers, which feedback has been really positive. I think it was great to have that health and social care focused event, because often us and other commission providers will go along and we'll be standing next to retail and other organisations, but to have that sort of health and social care focus, people were coming to the door and they were looking for a social care job, which was really fantastic to see. So ourselves and our commission providers were able to put job offers in hand after that event. And of course, we've been doing a lot of work on social media, so that's organic, and we've also been using first sort of set of paid targeted adverts to promote those in-person events. So page 6 of the appendix shows a summary of the outcomes so far and some visual examples of how the campaign's pulled together. So you can see a new campaign material manifesting itself in the new pop-up banners, the new leaflets, some of the social media adverts there as well. So altogether, that is some positive comm successes and progress we've made, but you can also see it is early days, but we also can see that there is some positive progress made in terms of the workforce. So we have recorded a slight uptick in applications made to the home care roles, and also an increase in job offers accepted since the campaign started. So that is positive to see. Elsewhere in the report, you'll see updates, including the publication of the annual performance report, which I can't believe was September, but it seems like quite a long time away. So we published that summary on our website, social media channels, and all the usual sort of means. But new for this year, we pulled together an explainer video to highlight the progress made in each of the outcome areas. So I'd encourage you to view that, and we can use that as we go throughout the year in sort of internal presentations, etc., to remind us of the progress that has been made. A little bit later in September, we welcomed the delegation of Dutch health and social care colleagues, which was a great event to promote the successes of integration, and brought together quite a few different services and the service users that are supported by those services to explain how integration has really worked for them. So that was a really positive event, but might have been overshadowed by the death of Her Majesty the Queen, and it did fall within the morning period. So I don't blame you if you did miss that piece of news. So I did really encourage you to have a review of that. That's on page 3 of the appendix. You also see updates in the report from the Home from Hospital project, which is a collaboration of our third sector colleagues, helping to ease pressure on hospital discharge by bringing together community support options from hospital and bringing those options straight to people who might need them. And so that was a pilot project which was extended earlier this year, and we did a bit of comms work to formally launch it in the media, and we did that alongside the volunteer recruitment day that they held in August. And then the report also covers the upcoming activity, which is either due to happen or has happened within the next reporting period. So that includes attendance and supporting the Falkirk Older People's Day, which was recently, several pieces of consultation work, which we've covered in earlier mentions today. So that's the strategic plan, the equality outcomes, the carer strategy, etc. So those pieces of work ongoing. And this week you might have seen that we've launched the new Carers Challenge Fund, and of course, as we go into winter, we'll be promoting communications around winter pressures and how people can be accessing primary care at the right place and the right time, and of course, looking to progress that recruitment campaign work and building the successes there. So taking you back to the recommendations of the report, quite an easy one, so just to consider and comment on the content of this communications update. So I'll hand you back to you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for this. I was particularly interested to see the bit about the paid social media,
yes,
and just to see some of the stats around that as well. It's something that I've been looking at, and it's quite an interesting approach as well. And also the visit from our folks in the Netherlands as well. I know we spoke about this before, so that was great. And I think it's just a shame it might have been overshadowed because I particularly thought it was great that they went along to see the whole mates and dates thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I will hand over to Councillor Hannah. She's got her hand up and keen to come in.
I am. Thank you very much for this report. I'm pleased to see and hear about the work you're doing in terms of promotion and recruitment. I was also very pleased to see the Health and Social Care Partnership at the Grays High School careers night as well, which I don't see a mention of. And they were kept quite busy. I was there myself with a couple of other councillors. And I think that's a really important way to go forward to try and promote the importance of work in the care sector for young people in the secondary schools. So well done on that.
Absolutely. I think that the young people engagement is absolutely key, and there's some exciting things we're planning to do. I know there's a project with Transformation Board regarding the simulation centre and how we can link schools with that. So we're keen to promote that that way as well. So yeah.
That's great, Paul. I'm assuming we'd see something about that in some future report of yours that comes back to this.
Absolutely.
Brilliant, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay, well, Paul, thank you very much for coming along with your paper today. And for the purposes of the minutes, the board, I'd like it minuted that we considered the report and made comments, I guess. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that then takes us on to item 17 on the agenda, which is simply for noting, which is the IGIB Clinical and Care Governance Committee minutes of the 20th of May, the IGIB Audit Committee minutes of the 17th of June, and the Strategic Planning Group minute of the 5th of August. Now, if there are any questions over any of those sets of minutes, I'm happy to take them. Okay, that's fine then. They were just simply for noting. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time today and for your patience around the technology, and apologies to those of you where the connection was a bit sporadic. The next meeting, Dave, you will remind me, is on the... I
think it was approved March 17th, is that?
The 31st of March. So we will see you all then, if not before. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.